the early days of automobiles were, honestly, pretty strange. As a driver, or even as a pedestrian, you never really knew which new, brilliant invention might hurt you next. Between the early 1900s and the mid-20th century, car development was moving incredibly fast, while safety standards were struggling to keep up. Engineers experimented freely, rules were loose, and common sense was sometimes optional. That combination led to some inventions that were useless at best and genuinely dangerous at worst. And today we're looking at exactly those ideas. Let's start with the first invention, known as the chin alarm. As the name suggests, the chin alarm was designed to prevent drivers from falling asleep at the wheel. The idea was simple but unsettling. A small device was attached under the driver's chin, or, in some versions, just behind the ear. When the driver's head dropped forward due to drowsiness, the device would trigger an alarm. That alone sounds uncomfortable, but some versions went much further. Certain physical models included a sharp needle positioned under the chin. If the driver nodded off, the needle would literally stab them to wake them up. While it may have kept drivers alert, it also introduced pain, distraction, and injury into an already dangerous situation. Next up is an invention that will shock pet lovers. The dog sack was an early attempt to transport pets in cars, but the execution was bizarre and alarming. Instead of placing the animal safely inside the vehicle, this device was mounted on the outside of the car, usually attached to a door or window. The pet was placed inside a sack-like container with only its head sticking out into the open air. The logic was ventilation and space-saving, but the risks were obvious. Exposure to wind, cold, debris, and even passing traffic made this one of the most unsafe pet transport ideas ever produced. Thankfully, this invention didn't last long. Moving on, we have the front-mounted pedestrian catcher. This invention wasn't designed to protect drivers, but pedestrians. Mounted on the front of the car, it resembled a metal frame or net positioned just ahead of the bumper. The idea was that if a car hit a pedestrian, the person would be caught by the device instead of being thrown under the wheels. While the intention sounds humane, the reality was far from safe. The rigid structures often caused severe injuries on impact. As vehicle design evolved, engineers realized it was far safer to redesign car fronts to absorb impact, rather than trying to physically trap a human body mid-collision. Another fascinating and risky category was the early smoker packages found in cars. Smoking was once deeply integrated into car culture, and manufacturers went all in. Cars featured pipe holders that suctioned directly onto the windshield, built-in pipe racks on the dashboard, cigarette dispensers, and countless ashtray designs. Some of these devices were placed dangerously close to flammable materials. Lit pipes falling during sudden braking caused burns and fires, and open ashtrays encouraged drivers to toss cigarette butts out the window. This led to countless roadside fires, especially during dry seasons. What was meant as a luxury convenience became a serious safety and environmental hazard. Next is a strange steering experiment known as the wrist twist steering system. Instead of a traditional steering wheel, this system used a rotating handle or cuff that the driver twisted using wrist movements. The idea was to reduce arm fatigue and improve control. In practice, it did the opposite. Fine wrist movements were far less precise during emergencies, and sudden evasive maneuvers became difficult or impossible. In panic situations, drivers often overcorrected or lost control entirely. The design also increased strain on wrists and joints, making long drives uncomfortable and unsafe. Now let's talk about one of the most ridiculous and dangerous car accessories ever offered, the in-car minibar. Yes, some cars were literally equipped with built-in bars designed to serve alcohol while on the road. These setups included bottle holders, glass racks, and sometimes even small refrigerators to keep drinks cold. While manufacturers argued that passengers could enjoy the feature, the temptation for drivers was obvious. At a time when drunk driving laws were weak or non-existent, this accessory encouraged extremely dangerous behavior. Even if the driver didn't drink, loose glass bottles and glasses became deadly projectiles during crashes. And now, we have glow-in-the-dark driving mittens. Before turn signals became standard, drivers relied on hand signals to communicate with others on the road. To make these signals more visible at night, some inventors came up with glow-in-the-dark gloves. While the intention was visibility, the execution was flawed. The glowing material often distracted the driver, reflected strangely on the windshield, and provided inconsistent signals to other motorists. As electric indicators became reliable, these mittens quickly disappeared, and for good reason. Another flaming hot accessory that looked impressive but turned out to be extremely dangerous was illuminated tires. These were tires made from translucent rubber, with light bulbs mounted inside the wheel to make them glow while driving. They were incredibly expensive and absurdly heavy, sometimes weighing up to 4 times more than a normal tire. That extra weight severely affected braking and suspension. At night, the glowing effect distracted other drivers and caused glare on dark roads. As the tires heated up during driving, the rubber softened and in some cases began to deform or partially melt. Traction was another major issue, especially on wet roads where these tires offered far less grip and were prone to sliding. Next, we moved to rear-facing seats in station wagons. At first glance, these seats seemed fun and practical. Mounted in the cargo area and facing backward, they were especially popular for kids. But safety was barely considered. In rear-end collisions, passengers in these seats were the first to absorb the impact. There were no crumple zones, no headrests, and often no seatbelts at all. Children sitting just inches from the rear door had virtually no protection. What seemed like a clever use of space turned into one of the most dangerous seating arrangements ever put into family cars. Now, let's talk about water-filled bumpers. The idea behind these bumpers was simple. Fill them with water to absorb impact and reduce damage during collisions. In reality, they introduced a long list of problems. Water added significant weight to the vehicle, affecting handling and braking. In colder climates, freezing was a serious issue. During crashes, the bumpers often ruptured or burst open, spraying water across the road. This could instantly turn the roadway into a slippery surface, causing secondary accidents for cars behind. Even the basic logic was flawed, since bumpers are meant to deform, not act like pressurized containers. Next on the list is a device dangerous mainly for something very valuable: vinyl records. In the 1950s and 60s, several car makers experimented with built-in vinyl record players, promising luxury entertainment on the road. On paper, it sounded elegant. In reality, it completely ignored basic physics. Cars vibrate, roads are uneven, and sudden movements are unavoidable. Every pothole or rough patch made the needle jump violently across the record. This didn't just cause skipping, it scratched the grooves permanently. Hard braking or sharp turns could send the tone arm slamming into the vinyl, carving visible damage in seconds. It was a perfect example of a clever idea that simply didn't belong in a moving vehicle. Moving on to coach-style doors. These doors were hinged at the rear and opened into the airflow while driving. If one accidentally opened at speed, the wind force would rip it fully open. Anyone trying to grab the handle could be pulled outward as the door acted like a sail. At higher speeds, the airflow made closing the door nearly impossible. This design turned a simple mistake into a potentially fatal situation, especially before seatbelts were common. Next is a personally fascinating invention known as the Brody knob. This was a small handle attached to the steering wheel to allow one-handed steering, often marketed to truck drivers and delivery workers. Under normal conditions, it worked fine. The danger appeared during sudden steering movements. If the front wheels hit a pothole or curb, the steering wheel could spin violently. The knob would whip around with enough force to break fingers or wrists. In crashes, the rigid knob sometimes turned into a spear, striking the driver in the chest or ribs. Second to last on the list are early child seat prototypes. These early designs focused more on comfort and visibility than safety. Some were mounted high on the seat so children could see out the window, while others were little more than padded chairs with minimal restraints. There was no real protection during sudden stops or crashes. In some cases, children were actually thrown forward with greater force due to their elevated position. It would take decades before child seats became truly protective devices. And finally, we reach the most infamous invention on this list: the bullet steering wheel. In the 1950s, Cadillac introduced a steering wheel with a large chrome spike in the center, shaped like a bullet. At the time, cars had no airbags and often no seatbelts. In frontal collisions, drivers were thrown forward directly into the steering wheel. That chrome spike acted like a spear, turning the steering column into a lethal weapon. What was meant to look stylish and futuristic became one of the most dangerous interior designs ever produced.